Worldwide labor conditions. They're really very different a lot of times when you really focus in on domestic versus worldwide, because the world is very different than one individual countries. A couple examples. Should you pursue this whole aspect of working internationally? That actually is a labor condition. We talk about global aspects of it for your career should go through. When a chance comes to become, and we call them an expatriate or expat as you go through, if your company comes along, are you going to be ready for that? These assignments could really give you a passport to the top because you'll have the domestic experience, plus also you're going to have worldwide experience to supplement your career pathway. It could be a phenomenal opportunity as you go through. If you do that, do your very best to make certain you have some type of a high-level mentor at the world headquarters here in the United States as you go out, and that way you can sit there and still be in the loop over here and not be passed over or forgotten or brought up to date as necessary as you go through. But before you accept that position, you need to really pay attention to exactly what do they want you to accomplish. Don't get all excited, go run off to some assignment, and then realize all of a sudden you made a major mistake. Know exactly what it is. Look in the country that you're going to. Do they have out of control inflation? How is their labor pool and the prospect out there? How good is that market? Know exactly what they're looking at. If they have an inflation rate of 5 to 8% higher than the home office as you go through, that's going to have an impact on your potential to have earnings generated from the foreign market and then contributing their profit back to the corporate office budget in the process, because you may have fabulous experience of 15 to 20% overall growth, but inflation eats away at the actual profitability of your company. So it really turns out to be almost nothing, and you actually lose ground sometimes in the process. So know exactly what they're looking for, but it is an opportunity. Pay attention though. Don't put your head up in the clouds in the process. Put your feet on the ground and pay attention to the numbers and understand exactly what you get into before you go through. But in the meantime, as you go into a new country, there's all kinds of huge opportunities as you go through. You're going to have to sit down and establish a series of things in the aspect of human resources that are very different a lot of times than for a common manager to go into a regular office. Usually, if you go into a domestic office or the world headquarters, you're going to have this whole list, the shopping list over here, already pre-established for you. When you go into a new country, it may be brand new turf for you. You need to estimate what you're going to need in your workforce to expand. You also have to figure out the recruitment and selection. It could be a very different process than human resources has on a domestic basis, because this is something brand new in a totally different country. Training and development could be really very different as you go through. Though so sometimes sitting in a classroom when you're one person talking to a group, but the training and development might be one-on-one for a while because it could be a brand new office. The developing people as you go through, what an opportunity to take people that have never experienced your company and train them in the way that you think would be best for them to sit down and meet the goals and objectives of your company. They're excited. It's a fresh new company for them, but for you, it could be old hat in the process. So here's a chance, new people, new process for them. They're excited. Can you do a really good job on them? Motivation as you go through. Think about the opportunities for them. Put yourself in their shoes and think as to how you can motivate them. And then look at the compensation. A lot of times, if you're going from a world headquarters into a brand new country as you go through, the compensation package can be completely different. But a lot of times, if you're going into a developing country, money that you would normally offer in the United States may be totally different. You can give them a portion of what you're offering, and it could be the top wage in that country as you go through. Huge opportunities there. The discipline. A lot of times you go into some other countries and you may find that the discipline might be a matter of, because of their culture, they may have a huge respect for senior level managers, and that could be you in the process you go through. And then be careful about employee termination, because it really could be totally different in the aspect of how you go about doing it, and making certain you don't destroy bridges in the process. All of this is opportunity, But along with opportunities comes potential dangers you go through because you're just fighting your way out. And you're also maybe not, this is your full-time thing in human resources. Maybe this is your first time in a new country and implementing all this into a brand new office as you go through. There's a lot of fun, could be a real huge opportunity, but also it could be very dangerous for your career pathway as you go through. Look at the overall size of the workforce that's available out there. There's a huge amount of potential employees as you go through. And a lot of times, if you're going into a developing nations, the population tends to be younger as you go through. And developed nations, they tend to sit down populations, they expect them to be in decline or an older population go through. So there's good and bad as you go through, younger population, developing, older population in developed countries as you go through. A lot of times in developed countries, that aging really is a complication because you may have a large group retiring off the market as you go through. Here's an example. The best data I could find is 2017. As you go through, you'll see around the world different types of population, and you also have a different kind of market as you go through in the process. So think about that aspect of it. What are the implications of an international company trends towards an aging population when you're looking at urbanization as you go through? And that's changing quite a bit as you go through. What changes are international companies likely to make to respond to those kind of trends as you go through? Urbanization is really big. In 2000, it really, according to the data that we have, 47% of the workforce was in urban conditions. Now in 2020, it's 56.2%, a dramatic increase, almost 10 points, 9 percentage points as you go through. And now they're saying in 2050, it's going to be 68%. Now, wait a minute, that was before COVID. COVID really sat down and showed that we can do a lot of work in non-urban areas. We can have a much more dispersed workforce. So I wouldn't trust that 68% right now. It may show up on different data and everything else, but we need to really pay attention to what is going to happen in the year 2025 to 30. Are we going to really be highly centralized in urban areas? Are we going to disperse like we're seeing a lot of things happening in the current days you go through? Regardless, though, urbanization really, where people are coming into cities to do work, especially in developing countries, does a couple of things. Number one, you have a lot of people competing for work, and the wages actually are much smaller than it would be in the developed countries you go through. But you also have low skill workers, a lot of people coming in, but low skill means another opportunity. You can use staff development to train them in the way you want them to behave and have your company culture. So it's good and bad at the same time. Low skill initially, but if you have a good training program, you can sit down and bring people in with low skill and sit down and train them in the way that you want and have your skill as you go through the process. You have different kinds of pools to deal with as well. The immigrant labor, you have a lot of people shifting from country to country to country as you go through. 64% of the world's migrants live in developed countries as you go through. And so here in the US, we have 4% of the world's population, but 20% of the world's migrants as you go through. So we are a developed nation, and migrants tend to gravitate towards that as you go through. So, but a lot of times the migrants, they get what we call the 3D jobs: dirty, dangerous, and degrading. Yeah, but it's a matter of it's something much better than they would have in their own country because the wages are head and shoulders above what they would earn in their own company. What we would consider in the United States to be low wages actually would be high wages in a different country. And a lot of times the people that come here in the process, that is a really huge amount of money compared to what they have in their own country. Guest workers, they go to a foreign country legally and have certain jobs on a temporary basis. We have a lot of visas here just for that type of worker. But you also have a brain drain, which is really unfortunate for the developing countries. Developing countries, somebody sits down there, they sacrifice, they go through, and they lose the opportunity in their own country because they're saying, look at that money over there. And so they shift and they go, wow, look at that. And they leave the country. So sometimes you have an opportunity because the brain drain has already drained some of the top skills out of the country. Can you bring them back in at your own money through your own company in the process as you go through? Labor unions in the United States, they're hugely declining. We're just over 10% of the workforce in the United States is part of a union. Other countries, though, it really changes as you go through. You'll see a lot of union activity in Europe, a lot of it in Mexico as you're going through, and really, and sometimes unions don't get traction in some countries like Japan as you go through. So labor unions is something to consider as you go through. Make certain when you go into that you read a lot of the labor agreements and you think and listen before you make decisions in the process. Here's a map as to labor union members as you go through. You'll see that sometimes in the United States, we have different aspects of it, but we really have a small population. But look at Sweden and Denmark, really at the super top up there, they have a lot of unions as you go through. So that being said, be cautious as you go through, know what you're doing. But that being said, HR on a global basis is similar to domestic HR, but legal matters could be very different, a lot of things. For example, I had a physical therapist one time, and she was a dual citizen of the United States and Egypt. She showed me her driver's license. On her driver's license, etc., and says, religion, Christian. On her driver's license, they asked that. And on top of that, they have a legal right to hire somebody from only their faith as they go through, whether it's Muslim or Christian. Oh, you're a Muslim. Well, we only hire Muslims here. Perfect. Come on in. You'll be fit in over here. Oh, we only hire Christians over here. That is legal in their country. In our country, it is not legal. So do not walk into another country with a premise saying, this is what is right and this is what's wrong. You need to pay attention, because just because it was right and you think that your culture is right initially, maybe it is, except for the fact that in their country, pay attention to what they consider right and wrong in the process, especially on legal matters as you go through. But there's a whole series of things that go well past all the normal things we talk about domestic HR. Urbanization, how we have a huge gravitation towards urban areas, especially for rural areas, guest workers, you have to deal with immigrant workers, workforce population, and unionization. They're all very different, and it really requires you to pay attention on a really clear basis, and don't move too quickly, because you may step into the mire and the muck of something that you don't even understand in the process. So be cautious on it, but it's a huge opportunity, but make certain that opportunity comes with a good, solid sense of caution as you go into it as well. Take care.